Greetings, friends. There's been a continuing battle over Dundas Square in Toronto that the media is largely ignoring. And the police have now actively tried to break up the protests, to disperse the people, to arrest people, even for standing on the sidewalk. So this is the issue. Many people do not want to back down. Many of the leaders have said we should not back down. And I agree. I agree with the logic of what they're saying. There are other ways to look at the situation, but I can sense that most people want to defend Dundas Square. Now, I don't particularly like Dundas Square, but then again, if you're fighting a war, do you really get to say, hey, let's fight in this battlefield, I like it over here? Sometimes that happens. Sometimes guerrilla warfare, they choose, the right terrain. But by and large, if you're in it with an army, it's going to suck. If you're going to, what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to get arrested, that day is going to suck for you. It doesn't matter if it's at Queen's Park or at Dundas Square or wherever it is. It's going to suck for you. But the thing is, Dundas Square, it's less space there. It's easier to get boxed in. It's just a more demonic part of the city. It's a very demonic place. There's just a bad energy there. It's highly commercial. And that's one of the reasons why it ended up, being such a demonic place. It's like the biggest crossroads. And I've had a bike. My e-bike was stolen near Dundas Square back in November. So if you're wondering, I don't have my e-bike anymore. Got stolen. Almost a $5,000 bike. The robber cut through a U-lock in 2 places and disabled a cable lock. So it's not like I didn't think of protecting my bike, but that's how it is in that part of the city. You can't really lock a bike there and for that long. It's not really a good idea. So I've been wanting to leave Yonge-Dundas for a while. I felt like we sort of ran through what we had been able to accomplish at that place. And back 2 months ago, I was telling some people I knew in the protest, I wish we could move back to Queen's Park or do something different, because I'm just getting tired of not protesting. I'm not tired of protesting. I'm just tired of Yonge-Dundas Square. However, when the police started dispersing the protest last Saturday, and then again this Saturday for the second consecutive week, they've tried to arrest people. Now, you can't back down and without losing face, because now if you go back to Queen's Park, which I still think is not a bad idea, but you'll be losing face, and the idea is, well, they'll arrest you eventually. If they don't arrest you here at Dundas Square, then they'll come arrest you eventually at wherever it is. I just feel like it's more symbolic appeal at Queen's Park. It's a nicer location. It's right in front of the Ontario legislature. There's trees, there's space. It'd be harder for them to box us in. But at the same time, I can sense that Dundas Square is where the people feel they want to be. I don't think it's just the leaders telling them. And the leaders don't have that much influence. And most of the leaders, we can't even trust them, to be honest. We can't really trust any of the leaders, which is not good. But thankfully, there's such a grassroots upsurge in this sort of thing. Like, even the marches now go without the regular leaders. Like, Lamont is wherever. He's gone wherever. And he's doing his own thing now, which is not bad, because his group, The Line, definitely a lot of sketchiness going on there. So probably a good thing that they went their separate ways. And So it's a crazy situation, and we've got this like militarization of the police. We've got all these police showing up at Yonge-Dundas. Like I walked by a few days ago on Saturday after the protest didn't exactly finish there, where they were marching, but there's a lot of police around there. There's like again probably 100 or 200 within a few blocks, and there were all these vehicles they were using. They were commandeering all these trucks. It was crazy. This is just like on streets which lead to Dundas Square or adjacent to it or right across from it. And there are different kinds of police, but I noticed that, well, there's the bike police who look, I think of them as the WASPs, not like WASPs like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, although a lot of them are white. But I call them WASPs because they wear these bright yellow jackets and these goofy looking helmets, but then black pants and a black like their black top and black pants, but then the yellow jacket goes around their black top, but you can still see a lot of the black underneath. So it just makes them look like wasps, and not in a good way, like, oh, these are attack wasps, even though bike cops are usually pretty harmless. But then they have these other guys, which I call the Hornets, and they're dressed all in black. But I mean, that's pretty much a standard. I don't know if it's black or dark blue, but it's very dark. But that's sort of the standard dress for the police anyway. So I'm not saying it's anything unusual, but they're bringing in all these goons, basically. All these goons, these big Goombas, these goons, and they're lumps, and they're stronger than me. I mean, when I call someone a lump, I don't necessarily mean like they're not strong. They could throw me to the ground, I'm sure, but they can take a hit. Probably punch. You could probably punch them in the head, and it wouldn't. If you weren't like a very strong person, they'd probably be able to take that, because they're lumpy, heavy dudes. They're not particularly tall, but they're not particular. Some of them are tall though, but not all of them. But they're not particularly short. They're stocky guys. They don't look highly intelligent, to say the least. They don't look dumb either. They are not highly motivated. They are there because they're getting paid and they're getting pensions and whatever. But these specific guys, I noticed, since they decided to crack down on the protests, they shuffled around who the police were that were following us. In the past it might be, there's always a lot of Asians, but I noticed there were a lot of white cops in the past, but following our protest, escorting the march, whatever. But now these people, they've chosen to really get up in our face and crack down on us. It's almost all Asian cops, and after that blacks and brown people. And I just don't, I mean, there's some white cops there, don't get me wrong, there's some white male, I mean, obviously there are female cops, but I mean, I'm not paying, there's always going to be the female cops, so I'm not really paying too much attention to that here. The ones they're bringing in to really be the enforcers, the real enforcers here, big stocky dudes, not white. And why am I mentioning this? Because they're dealing with a protest group which is probably 90% white people. We have some blacks, we have some Asians, we have different races from all around, but it does happen to be mostly white people. So that's an interesting racial dynamic. And of course, the police are also all wearing masks. They have to be, right? Well, I would hope, I mean, who knows? Some of them probably would wear it anyways, but wearing a mask is gonna, because it helps to give you a sense of loss of identity, it also empowers people and empowers aggressiveness, empowers aggression. I'm not saying this is for everyone, but I do believe they've they've done studies on. I know anyway. Anyone can refer to studies, but it makes sense to me. Like the same way a criminal wears a mask because he doesn't want to be identified. It gives you a bit of sense of freedom to. Now you can really get tough, do what you want, and protesters will be telling the cops, "Oh, you're breaking the charter rights. You're breaking the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms right now." Or, "Oh, you're doing this just so you can save your pension." The other thing is like we say, "Oh, you could be doing real arrests right now. Like there's real crimes going on right now elsewhere in the city, like stabbings, shootings, real crime. But here you are breaking up anti-lockdown protesters who just want to be able to have a normal life where we open our businesses and can go outside and live a relatively normal life. If such thing is a crime and you're arresting us." And again, this is a valid criticism, but do they care? Not really. And in a way, we are committing a crime because we're standing up to the state. And so you know what this is about. We are threatening the state, not explicitly. We don't want to overthrow the state, but by our mere presence and language and message, it is a threat to what they want to do. So it would cause, if we wanted things our way, it would be a different society. It would be better in our view, but it would be not what they want, and that's a crime for them. They're defining that as a crime. Maybe that's not fair, but you can't exactly expect them to think, "Oh, okay, well, I mean, a crime from whose perspective?" They don't, and because they don't care about breaking the Canadian rights of like freedoms and all that stuff, because look, these are Asian guys, black guys mostly, breaking up our protest, arresting us. Some white guys too, some real turncoat weasel whites. Oh yeah, they're there as well. But for the primary, the different ethnicities, it's like, well, their forefathers, they didn't write the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They didn't write it. They weren't even in the country. Now, these guys were probably born in Canada. They're what my friend Sin might call a CBC, like Canadian-born Chinese, or a banana. With the black guys, they might not be immigrant, but they probably are to some extent. But the brown guys would be. So yeah, they weren't around for all of that stuff. And I mean, I know I'm generalizing a bit, but. And they're spending a huge amount of money keeping people here, keeping all these soldiers, well, I was saying soldiers, it is kind of militarized, keeping them, cops get paid so much money. Like, they get paid a huge amount of, like, when they do overtime, they just make a killing. They get paid so much, and they're spending huge amounts of money. So I know you could say, well, that's taxpayer money. Our own money is being wasted. But you can also look at it on the flip side. It's like, yeah, but this is a war of attrition, and we're clearly making them spend more money than we are. And again, okay, maybe it's coming back to bite us in taxes. It will eventually. But I mean, what's the sense of that if your whole tax base is destroyed and your business is destroyed and you're unemployed or whatever? Then you want to, so you got to talk about that before you can talk about what sort of taxes you can pay. So anyways, in that sense, like, we're just making them expend huge amounts of energy for limited expenditure. Well, we expend a lot of energy too, but for easy, like, it comes naturally to us because we want to do it. Like, we're highly motivated, and they are not highly motivated, and they're just paid mercenaries, basically. I'm not saying they're exactly mercenaries, but they kind of are, like, in a similar fashion. They're just there because they're getting paid, and they trust their lord in a medieval sense. When we say, oh, we'll take you to court, or you're breaking this law, or whatever, They don't seriously think that there's any threat to them. They trust their organization to protect them. It's as simple as that. And they're probably right. Nothing will probably happen to them. Because they're just doing what they're doing what they're ordered to do. And then you can say the meme is, oh well, that's what the Nazis said. I was just following orders. Yeah. Well, a lot of people are, you always have to, I mean, yes, the Nazis did that, but then so did pretty much any army ever. Well, there is exceptions, but it's kind of what an army has to do, is it has to follow orders. So it's kind of, whether the Nazis, I mean, sure, they followed orders that were bad, but I mean, that's kind of a moot point. So yeah, they're not that invested in it. The people who are invested are the Antifa types. BLM isn't even that invested. Like I've said before, where are they? The BLM, the Black Lives Matter protesters, they showed up for a few months during the summer months. They were only there because they were organized by certain people who get money from wherever. The rank and file, they're just they're younger or whatever. They're people that are coming in from a totally different segment, not nearly as organic. And they just fizzled away with the weather. Once the weather got cold, you didn't see them anymore. And I'm sure they'll be brought out again. So, who are the motivated protesters? There's only going to be some Antifa types, and I haven't even seen that. I haven't barely seen any Antifa in doing this whole thing. I know they're around. But I just haven't really seen them here in Toronto. I know they do come out to certain things, and they don't like us. They'd like to photograph us and turn us over to the authorities. Oh, and so I mentioned this huge police presence at Dundas Square 2 weeks now, and probably going to continue into the near future, foreseeably. That parallels what happened in Washington, D.C. at the inauguration of Joe Biden. They said there were like tens of thousands of they brought in the National Guard, or there were tens of thousands of soldiers there. The whole area around the Capitol locked down completely, eerily quiet. Just like a regime that's afraid of its own people, afraid of a terrorist attack that never came, that they were trying to scare everyone to think was a real possibility. They're scared of their own people. And so it's an interesting, we can see that this is not, it's going on in more than one country, this escalation of the state against these grassroots protests. And there is a medieval or fascistic element to what's going on. Fascism, that has different definitions, and that's a huge topic to get into. But from what I've listened to, from what I understand, there's some people, they define fascism as when the state works with corporations. Like Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, they weren't all that different, but whereas like the people, supposedly the people or the state, owned all the means of production and the factories in the Soviet Union, and I guess technically they could own all the businesses if they wanted to. I don't know exactly how that was, but most of the important production was owned by the state. But in Germany, they still had corporations that were working with the regime, and so the corporations still took care of certain things on their own. So there was a bit more freedom in that sense, but not really, just controlled through the corporations who worked ultimately with the state. And we can see now that the state in our day is just one organism with the media, with the corporations. In fact, the corporations have the upper hand, certainly. They own the state. They own the government, the politicians. Some people would and then would point out the militarization of fascism. I don't know. I mean, there's different kinds of fascism, like in Spain and Italy and different places. But I guess, yeah, there was kind of a bit of the militarization. We're seeing that, with the inauguration in the U.S., and we're seeing that at Dundas Square. But that's not exactly like brown shirts, because brown shirts were, from what I understand, they were supposed to be motivated, like that kind of idea. Like those people were motivated. They were like Boy Scouts and, that kind of idea. Like they were there, like the Hitler Youth and the Sturmabteilung. Those guys were motivated. They were there because they wanted to be there, and life had, thrown them there. That's not like these cops. These cops are not like brown shirts. So that aspect of fascism we're not seeing. But we are seeing the militarization aspect. But by the way, the cops, they're incompetent. And they're not incompetent at arresting us, but they don't, like I said, they just look like lumpy, not so smart, just going along with the flow, and that's not good for your future movement if that's the kind of people you have to rely on. Some people would define fascism as a reaction to communism. So in that sense, I don't think that's would describe the situation we're living in. But yeah, there are some aspects of fascism to this situation, where the high militarization and the fact that the state and the corporations, it's blended together. They're against us. They're using their goons, their wasps and their hornets to go on the attack, to break us up, and we find ourselves dispersed on the march. This was the last thing I wanted to conclude with. And now it becomes a question of communication. And we find ourselves walking, or like I started out in Queen's Park thinking there would be a protest there. There didn't really end up being one. Because there's been divisions within the movement too. Some people, they don't like the leadership, and they want to start their own thing back at Queen's Park. But so I wasn't sure what was going on, but I was walking around Queen's Park for a while until I did meet some people who had come from Dundas Square, and I finally went with them and ended up linking up with a march. But it was, it's the sort of thing where you have to have more organic links with people where you can communicate, and then the state may be watching our communications. Like apparently WhatsApp is now gone full surveillance, so you can't really trust them to communicate. I mean, you can't really trust your text messaging anyways on your phone, but I've heard that Telegram is better. I don't know, for communication safety. We'll see. But that's one thing you have to be. If it's not that, it's just word of mouth and having more personal connections with people. So when things change, you can adapt. Now, with this battle over the Dundas Square, it may come to a head. We'll see what happens. But you always have to be thinking like, not always you have to expend all your energy in one place. You can adapt, you can fall back, you can regroup, but you always keep the spirit going. You don't want to lose face. So I can understand with that. You have to tap in to what the grassroots is doing. You don't want to go against that flow. Even if you think, oh, it's like Gettysburg, like the march has begun, and maybe so. A lot of the Confederates who started marching across that field at Gettysburg back in, when was it, July 1863 or so, like they knew, a lot of them must have known, like, oh, this isn't good, like I don't think this is the right terrain. We should like, do we want to, like, the General Robert E. Lee, he could have just kept playing for time. He could have kept draining the Union war effort, because he was totally draining them. He was in their territory. But they took a stand, and they sent like half his army out across this field, and they just got destroyed. And a lot of them must have known that it was going to happen, and they still. But so why did they choose to go? If you know that you're going to get destroyed, well, they went because they had to stay loyal to their. You can't be a coward, right? So, anyways, that's probably something that I've thought about. I don't want to be a coward. I don't want to get arrested either, but I don't want to be a coward. So that's something that everyone has to work out in their own mind. Hasta luego, amigos.